I have lived in this city my entire life, and Lake Charles has changed before my eyes. The oil rigs that sprang up one after another along the coast became symbols of my rise. Once, I myself stood at the base of these metal giants, climbing higher every day. Now I am 73, and I watch them from the window of my house on the hill where I moved 20 years ago. Back then, Esther was still alive and filled these rooms with her presence. Now there is only me and the ghosts of memories. My name is Kieran Polk. I earned enough money so that my only son, Torin, would never know what it was like to stand on an oil rig under the scorching Louisiana sun. Perhaps that was my mistake. The boy grew up soft and spineless, always seeking approval. First mine, then his mother's, then this woman's, Darcy Harding. I first saw her at some charity event. Torin was 34, she was about 28. She worked for the PR agency that organized the event and literally glowed in the crowd, a striking blonde with sharp eyes and a flawless smile. Too flawless, in my opinion. Dad, I want you to meet someone, Torin said, bringing her over to me. There was something like pride in his eyes. This is Darcy. We've been dating for 3 months. She held out her perfectly manicured hand to me, and I felt her gaze slide over my white gold cufflinks, a gift from Esther on our 30th anniversary. Mr. Polk, at last. Torin has told me so much about you, she sang, but her eyes were appraising my suit, my watch, my shoes. You're a true legend in the oil industry. I smiled and shook her hand, but something inside me tensed. Over my many years in business, I've learned to recognize people who see not you, but the opportunities you can provide them. Nice to meet you, Darcy. I hope my son hasn't embellished my biography too much. Oh no, he always speaks of you with such respect, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Your house in Oak Hills must be magnificent. Thorin promised to show me around sometime. Just like that. She didn't even bother to hide that she had already found out where I lived. In the most expensive neighborhood in town. Esther would have seen right through her. My late wife had a gift for seeing through people. That evening I watched them from across the room. Torin was like a puppy on a leash. Wherever she went, he followed. Darcy skillfully introduced him to influential people, maintained small talk, and laughed at the right moments. My son looked both happy and lost, as if he couldn't believe his luck. She's using him, I said to Esther when I got home. Torin is just her ticket to high society. Kieran, my wife gently rebuked me, putting down her book. You're always too harsh on people. Give the girl a chance. Esther was already sick by then, although we both pretended that everything was fine. Cancer was eating her from the inside, and there was nothing I could do about it. All my money and all my connections were useless against this enemy. She died 3 months later. Torin was inconsolable, but Darcy was there for him, supporting him, organizing the memorial service, helping with the paperwork. I couldn't help but admit that she skillfully took control of the situation, although something told me that there was a calculation behind it. Their wedding took place exactly 1 year after Esther's funeral. I considered it disrespectful to his mother's memory, but I kept quiet. Torin was 35, a grown man, and had the right to make his own decisions, even if they were wrong. The ceremony was lavish. Darcy insisted on holding it at the Crystal Garden, the most expensive banquet hall in town. Of course, I paid for it. You don't have to do this, Dad, Torin said uncertainly as I wrote the check. It's tradition, son, I replied. The bride's father usually pays for the wedding, but since Mr. Harding, as I understand it, is unable to. Little was known about Darcy's parents. Her father was somewhere in the Midwest. Her mother was deceased. Darcy had no contact with them and did not invite them to the wedding. Another red flag that I chose to ignore for my son's sake. Darcy looked stunning at the wedding. A white dress from a famous designer. Diamond earrings. My gift to my daughter-in-law, whom I was trying to accept. Torin looked at her adoringly, and I watched as she introduced my son to her friends, young, ambitious people with hungry eyes. This is my father-in-law, Kieran Polk, she said, introducing me to another group of guests. The famous Louisiana oil tycoon. I was never a tycoon, just a lucky engineer who invested in promising fields at the right time. But Darcy liked to exaggerate my status, creating an image of a family rolling in money. After the wedding, the newlyweds moved into the house I bought them as a wedding gift. It wasn't as big as mine, but it was in a good neighborhood, not far from downtown. I visited them once a week for Sunday dinners, and each time I noticed more and more changes. New furniture, paintings, appliances. Torrin had never been a big spender, and his salary as a legal advisor to an oil company didn't allow for such expenses. "Nice house," I said one day, looking at the new crystal chandelier in the living room. "Yes, Darcy has turned it into a real work of art," my son replied proudly. "She has incredible taste." "And a budget, it seems," I remarked. Torrin hesitated. "Well, Darcy has good connections. She managed to buy a lot at a discount. Plus, she got promoted at the agency." I nodded, but mentally made a note to check their financial situation. It wasn't that I didn't trust my son. I just knew how easily a young family could get bogged down in debt trying to impress others. That day, Darcy served lobster for dinner and opened a bottle of champagne that cost more than Torrin's weekly salary. "We have something to celebrate," she announced as she filled the glasses. "I've been offered a partnership at the agency. That means we can afford a little more now." "Congratulations," I said, raising my glass. "That sounds impressive." "Oh yes," Darcy gave me her signature smile. "Now Torrin and I will be able to travel more often. Mr. Polk, life is so short. You have to enjoy it while you can." I heard an echo of what Esther often said in her words, but coming from my wife, it sounded like a reminder to appreciate the simple joys, not an excuse for senseless spending. "While you're young," I added, sipping my champagne, "at my age, you start to value stability more than adventure." "Oh, but wouldn't you like to see the world again, Karen?" Darcy switched to informal address imperceptibly, as if testing boundaries. "After all these years of hard work, you deserve a break. Perhaps a cruise?" Thorin said you've never been to the Mediterranean. "I don't like ships," I snapped, "or crowds of tourists. Dad prefers his home," Thorin interjected with an apologetic smile. "After Mom died, he became even more of a homebody." Darcy looked at me with an expression that could have been mistaken for sympathy if not for the cold calculation in her eyes. "Such a big house for one person. It must be lonely." "I have enough company from the ghosts of the past," I replied and saw her grimace slightly. After lunch, when Darcy went out on the terrace to talk on the phone, I tried to talk to my son about money. "Torrin, I see how hard you try to give Darcy everything she wants, but don't forget to be reasonable." "Dad, it's fine," he said, looking a little annoyed. "We're not poor. Darcy really does earn good money, and she knows how to find good deals. I just don't want you to end up in debt. The good life has a way of becoming addictive." "Not everyone measures success by the amount of money in their bank account," Torrin snapped. "Darcy believes in living in the present and not putting off happiness until later." His words hurt me. All my life I had saved, invested, and put money aside to ensure that Esther, Torrin, and I would have a comfortable retirement. And now my son seemed ready to throw it all away. "Living in the moment doesn't mean getting into debt for fleeting pleasures," I remarked. "But it's your life. It's your decision." I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. Through the terrace window, I could see Darcy talking emotionally to someone on the phone, waving her free hand. Noticing my gaze, she quickly ended the conversation and returned to the house with a serene smile. "Is everything okay?" Torrin asked. "Yes, just work," she dismissed. "Are you done with your man talk?" "I was just about to leave," I said. "Thanks for lunch, it was delicious." "Come back next Sunday," Darcy suggested enthusiastically. "I'll have a surprise for you." "What is it?" I asked, unable to hide my suspicion. "If I tell you, it won't be a surprise," she winked playfully. "But you'll like it, I promise." I nodded and said goodbye. On the way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that Darcy was up to something. Her interest in my money was becoming more and more obvious, and Thorin seemed too blinded by love to notice. Darcy's surprise turned out to be an album of photos of my house, a professional interior photo shoot that she had supposedly commissioned as a gift. "I thought you might use these photos if you ever decide to sell the house," she said, handing me the glossy album. "Sell the house?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Why would I do that?" "Well, it's so big for one person," she repeated her argument, "and it must be expensive to maintain. With that money, you could buy something smaller, and the rest, well, spend on yourself. Or leave it to Torrin." Or to you, I couldn't help saying. She looked offended, but only for a moment. Kieran, I'm just looking out for you. At your age, the stairs in all these rooms can become a problem. Many people end up moving to more comfortable homes. Thanks for your concern, I replied dryly, but I'm going to die in this house just as I planned. Esther and I chose it together. Torrin, who had been watching our conversation, looked upset. Darcy just wanted to do something nice, Dad. I appreciate the sentiment, I lied, but not the plans for my property. It was the first time I had openly expressed my distrust of Darcy. The atmosphere at the table became tense, and the rest of the dinner passed in awkward silence. As I was leaving, Thorne apologized for me. I'm sorry, he can be harsh sometimes. It's his age and loneliness. I understand, I heard Darcy reply. Don't worry, I'm not offended. But I knew it was a lie. I saw calculation in her eyes. She saw me as an obstacle that needed to be overcome. And at that moment, I realized that the war for my fortune and my son had already begun. 2 years flew by unnoticed. Our Sunday dinners became a tradition, although each time I wanted to participate less and less. Darcy learned to hide her true character better, but I could still see through her mask. My son was less fortunate. He was blinded by his love for her and seemed to become softer and softer under her influence. That Sunday, I arrived earlier than usual. I parked my old Cadillac in the driveway and noticed their brand new Lexus gleaming in the sun. The car had appeared 3 months ago, another purchase they couldn't afford on their salaries. The front door was unlocked. I went inside and heard Darcy's voice coming from the kitchen. She was talking on the phone, unaware of my presence. Yes, don't worry, she said, lowering her voice. We'll have enough soon. The old man won't go anywhere without his only son. I froze, listening. He's stubborn, but I know how to push the right buttons. Thorin? She snorted. He doesn't even notice. You have nothing to worry about. I quietly backed away to the front door, opened it, and closed it loudly to announce my presence. I have to go, Darcy said quickly into the phone, and when I entered the kitchen, she was already putting the phone in her pocket with a smile on her face. Kieran, you're early. The traffic was lighter than usual, I replied, watching her closely. Where's Torrin? At the store, picking up the wine you like, she said, turning to the stove where something was simmering. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Darcy bustled around the kitchen like the perfect hostess, but I noticed a slight blush on her cheeks. I wondered who she had been talking to and what she was planning. It smells wonderful, I said, sitting down at the kitchen island. Your phone call sounded intriguing. She froze for a moment, but then continued cutting vegetables. Just work stuff. We have a new big client. Lots of commotion. On Sunday? There are no days off in PR, she smiled over her shoulder, especially when you become a partner. I nodded, pretending to believe her. Over the past 2 years, I had learned to play this game with her. She pretended to be a caring daughter-in-law, and I pretended to be a trusting father-in-law. How are your investments? She asked, changing the subject. Torrin mentioned that you're thinking about buying another piece of land. There it was. Every time she found a way to bring up money. I'm thinking about it, I replied evasively. At my age, it's not worth rushing into such decisions. But land is a sound investment, she continued, setting the table, especially in our area. You could leave it to Torrin when... She didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what she meant. When I die. This woman was already dividing up my inheritance. When I decide to sell it at a profit, I finished for her. I'm not going to the other side yet, Darcy. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Of course not. I'm just talking about planning your inheritance. Torrin is so worried about you. He wants you to be secure in your future. Torrin or you? I looked her straight in the eye. My son has never been particularly interested in my financial affairs. People change, Darcy shrugged. Marriage makes men think about the future. The front door opened and Torrin appeared with a bottle of wine. He looked tired and haggard, as if he hadn't slept for several nights in a row. Dad, he tried to sound enthusiastic. You're here already. We hugged and I could feel how much weight he had lost. His once solid frame had become angular, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Are you okay? I asked quietly while Darcy turned away to the stove. Yes, just a lot of work, he smiled weakly, and not much sleep. At lunch, Darcy, as usual, dominated the conversation, talking about new clients, vacation plans, and how much she was appreciated at work. Torrin was mostly silent, only occasionally nodding and agreeing. "How are things at work, son?" I asked, trying to engage him in conversation. Torrin looked up from his plate. "Fine. Nothing special." "Torrin is too modest," Darcy interjected. "He was promoted to senior legal counsel. Unfortunately, his salary didn't increase as much as he would have liked. Again with the money. Her persistence was starting to annoy me. "Congratulations," I raised my glass. "You've always been a smart guy. I'm proud of you." Torrin blushed slightly at the praise, and for a moment I saw in him the boy I had raised. But then Darcy put her hand on his shoulder, as if to assert her rights. "We're thinking of buying a boat," she announced. "Torrin has always dreamed of sailing." "Really?" I looked at my son in surprise. As far as I could remember, he had been afraid of water ever since he nearly drowned at the age of 12. "Well, not exactly dreamed." Torrin hesitated, but Darcy convinced me it would be fun. "And expensive," I added. "Maintaining a boat costs a pretty penny." "Life is short, Kieran," Darcy smiled. "You have to enjoy it while you can." "I always say that." Yes, she really did always say that. Words stolen from my Esther. After lunch, Thorne and I went out to the backyard. He proudly showed me the new gazebo they had installed, another extravagance they could hardly afford. "Dad," he began when we were alone, "I wanted to ask, you're okay with money, right?" I looked at him in surprise. "Of course, why?" "It's just—" He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly nervous. "Darcy said that oil company stocks are falling and your investments might lose value. She's worried that you might be left without a livelihood." I struggled to contain my anger. So that's how she manipulates him, by making him worry about my financial situation so that he starts taking an interest in my money. "Son," I put my hand on his shoulder, "I've been investing for 50 years. My assets are diversified and well protected from any market fluctuations. You have nothing to worry about." "But maybe we should set up a meeting with your financial advisor," Torrin insisted. "Darcy knows a good specialist who could review your portfolio." "Thanks, but no thanks," I tried to speak calmly. "I have my own advisor whom I've been working with for 30 years, and I am absolutely confident in my financial situation." Torrin nodded, but I could see from his face that he wasn't convinced. Darcy had thoroughly brainwashed him. "Better tell me," I lowered my voice, "is everything okay with you and Darcy? You look exhausted." "Everything's fine," he replied too quickly. "Just work and, you know, family life can be complicated sometimes." "I can imagine," I said, glancing meaningfully at the house where Darcy was gathering dishes. "Especially when you're living beyond your means." Thorin tensed. "What do you mean?" "The new car, the boat, this gazebo." I gestured around the yard. "All that costs money, son. A lot of money." "We've got it under control," he turned away. "Darcy makes good money. So do I." "Enough for all this?" "Dad," his voice hardened, "I don't want to discuss this. We're doing fine." I decided to back off. Pressing further would risk our relationship, which was already becoming increasingly strained. "Okay, son. I'm just worried about you." "Don't be," he tried to smile. "I'm fine, really." But his eyes told a different story. The following week, I decided to test my suspicions. Darcy had mentioned that she had late meetings with clients on Thursdays. I parked near their agency and waited. At 6 o'clock, I saw her leave the building and get into a taxi. Instead of going home, the taxi headed toward the upscale Riverbend neighborhood. I followed at a safe distance. The taxi stopped near the Azure Coast restaurant, one of the most expensive in the city. Darcy got out, beautiful and confident in her form-fitting red dress, a far cry from the business suit she wore at the office. She went inside, and I had to be resourceful to follow her. Fortunately, the Maitre d' recognized me. I had dined here several times with business partners, and showed me to a table in the corner with a good view of the room. Darcy was sitting at a table by the window. A few minutes later, a man joined her, tall with an artistic appearance, about 35 years old. They kissed, not in a businesslike manner, but like lovers. I felt anger boiling up inside me, not out of jealousy, but out of betrayal. My daughter-in-law was cheating on my son. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw them holding hands, her laughing with her head thrown back, him leaning toward her with intimate smiles. They looked like a couple in love, enjoying each other's company. When the waiter brought them champagne, I asked my waiter to come over. Excuse me, could you find out the name of that gentleman by the window? I think I know him, but I can't remember where from. The waiter hesitated, but a hefty bill that found its way into his pocket dispelled his doubts. That's Mr. Pierce Blackwood, he said quietly. A photographer. He often dines here with clients. Thank you, I nodded. And please don't mention that I asked. Pierce Blackwood. Now Darcy's lover had a name. I decided to stay and see how their evening ended. They spent almost 2 hours at the table, then paid and left together. I followed them at a safe distance and saw them get into his sports car and drive away. I didn't have to guess where they were going. The next day, I hired a private investigator. Gerald Morton was a former police officer I had dealt with in the past when one of my employees had been dishonest. He was expensive, but discreet and effective. I need information about a man named Pierce Blackwood, I told him, a photographer, and his relationship with this woman. I showed him a photo of Darcy from her wedding to Torrin. Family problems? Morton asked, studying the photo. You could say that, I replied without going into details. How deep can you dig? As deep as you want, Mr. Polk, he smiled. It's just a question of price. Money is no object, I wrote a check for the advance. I need to know everything. Who he is, where he lives, how long they've been seeing each other, what they talk about. I'm particularly interested in whether they mention me or my son. Morton nodded, tucking the check into his inside pocket. Understood. Give me a week. The week dragged on agonizingly. I couldn't sit still, wondering whether to tell Torrin about his wife's infidelity or wait until I had irrefutable proof. On Sunday, I went to their house for lunch again, now with a heavy heart and a burden of knowledge. Darcy greeted me as usual, with a smile and a hug. Looking at her, no one would have suspected that just 3 days ago she had been in bed with another man. Kieran, you look tired, she remarked, taking my coat. Is everything okay? Just didn't sleep well, I replied, watching her reaction. I was worried about Torrin. Torrin? She frowned. Why? He seems depressed lately. Well, work is wearing him out, she shrugged. You know how it is. But I'm taking care of him. Yes, I've seen how you're taking care of him, I thought, but said nothing. Torrin came out of his office, and I noticed again how thin and haggard he looked. Something in his eyes spoke of a deep inner conflict. Dad, he hugged me, and I could feel him shaking. Are you okay? I asked quietly. Yes, just... He glanced back at Darcy, who had gone into the kitchen. We need to talk. Later. I nodded, feeling my heart sink with foreboding. Maybe he already knew. Maybe that's why he looked so exhausted. Lunch was tense. Darcy dominated the conversation as usual, but I noticed that Torrin barely looked at her. When she talked about her vacation plans, he just nodded, showing no enthusiasm. I think we should go to the Bahamas next month, Darcy said. The weather is perfect there right now. Kieran, would you like to join us? We could pay for it from the account we talked about. What account? I looked at her suspiciously. Well, Thorin mentioned that you were thinking about a joint investment account for the family. She glanced quickly at my son, who suddenly became very busy cutting the meat on his plate. I didn't say anything like that, I shook my head, and I'm not going to open joint accounts. Maybe I misunderstood, Darcy smiled, but her eyes remained cold. In any case, a vacation would do you good. After dinner, when Darcy was doing the dishes, Thorin took me into his office and closed the door. What's going on, son? I asked bluntly. You're not yourself. Thorin sank heavily into a chair and covered his face with his hands. I don't know what to do, Dad. I think Darcy, he faltered, is cheating on you? I finished for him. He looked up at me in surprise. You know, I have my suspicions. I didn't want to say that I had been following her. There are signs. I found messages on her phone, Thorin whispered. She's been seeing some photographer for several months now. I sat down next to him and put my hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry, son. But that's not all, he continued, his voice trembling. She keeps asking about your money, about how to get access to it. She wants me to convince you to rewrite your will, to appoint me as your trustee. There it was. My worst suspicions were confirmed. And you? I looked him in the eyes. What do you want? I don't know. He shook his head. I love her, Dad. Or I did. I'm confused. At that moment, I made a decision. I needed to gather all the evidence before I acted. Morton was supposed to contact me in a few days, and then I would have the full picture of Darcy's betrayal. Don't do anything yet, I said quietly. Pretend everything is normal. I need to check something, and then we'll decide what to do next. What are you up to? Thorin looked worried. Just trust me, son. I won't let her use you or get my money. Thorin nodded, and I saw relief in his eyes. He had finally shared his burden with someone. But I also saw the pain of a man who had been betrayed. I left them with a heavy heart, but with firm resolve. Darcy was playing a dangerous game, using my son and planning to get her hands on my money. Now I needed to find out how deep her conspiracy went and what role this photographer, Pierce Blackwood, played in it. Gerald Morton called me exactly 1 week after our meeting. His voice sounded as usual, calm and professional, but I detected a note of concern. Mr. Polk, we need to meet. I have some information that will interest you. We agreed to meet at a small cafe on the outskirts of town where no one knew us. Morton arrived with a leather folder and a flash drive. Pierce Blackwood, 36 years old, he began without preamble as soon as the waitress left our table. Freelancer, specializing in advertising photography and photo shoots for glossy magazines. Incomplete higher education. Dropped out of art college in his 3rd year. A wealthy client base, but constantly in debt due to his passion for expensive things and gambling. Morton laid several photos on the table. They showed Pierce and Darcy entering a hotel together, dining in a restaurant, kissing in a car. They've been dating for about 7 months, the detective continued. Judging by the intercepted messages, their relationship began during a photo shoot for her agency's advertising campaign. And my son? I asked, looking at the photos. He has no idea, or he pretends not to. Mrs. Polk is very careful. She only meets with Blackwood on work days when your son is at work, or supposedly during business trips. I nodded, feeling anger rising inside me. What about the conversations about money? Morton took the printouts of the messages out of the folder. This is the most interesting part. They are planning a future together, and your money plays a key role in it. I scanned the text. Darcy wrote to her lover, "Soon we will have enough. T has already signed the documents. Access is open." The old man didn't even notice. What documents? I asked, feeling a chill inside. As I understand it, we're talking about a power of attorney to manage part of your finances. Your son probably signed it without reading it, or he was told it was something else. I closed my eyes, trying to control my emotions. Thorin, my trusting boy, what have you done? What else? They're planning a cruise. Morton showed me another printout. A luxury cruise on the Mediterranean. 2 weeks, a deluxe cabin. The cost is almost $40,000. And who's paying? Apparently you, he smiled bitterly. Departure is in a week from Barcelona. But before that, they plan to spend a few days at the Azure Lagoon Hotel. That's, I know what that is, I interrupted him. One of the most expensive hotels in Europe. Exactly. The reservation has already been paid for. And here's what's interesting. The payment came from your credit card. I felt the blood drain from my face. My own card? How is that possible? Are you sure? Morton nodded. Absolutely. I have my sources in the banking system. The transaction went through 3 days ago. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process the information. Darcy had somehow gained access to my accounts, and Thorin had probably unwittingly helped her. There's something else, Morton lowered his voice. They discussed the possibility of staying in Europe permanently. Blackwood mentioned his connections in Italy, where they could start a new life. With my money, I added. Of course. Their plans included $500,000, enough to buy a small villa and live comfortably for the time being. I thanked the detective for the information, paid him well, and asked him to keep me informed of any new details. After our meeting, I immediately drove to the bank. The First National Bank of Lake Charles building towered over the street, a 20-story glass tower, a symbol of financial stability. I had been a customer of this bank for 40 years and knew many of the employees personally. Mr. Polk, branch manager Bronwyn Quincy greeted me with a professional smile. How can I help you today? I need to check the activity on all my accounts for the last month, I said, trying to sound calm, and find out who has access to them. Bronwyn led me into a private office, sat down at a computer, and began her investigation. I watched her face as it changed from focus to surprise to concern. Mr. Polk, she finally said, There are several large transactions that seem unusual to me. A cruise payment, a hotel reservation in Barcelona, several international transfers. I didn't make them, I snapped. Someone accessed my accounts without my knowledge. Bronwyn looked shocked. But we have strict security protocols. To gain such access, a person would need to have power of attorney or be added to the list of authorized persons. Check who has been added recently. She turned back to the computer, then looked up at me in surprise. 2 weeks ago, Darcy Polk was added to the list. The documents were signed by you and notarized. That's impossible. I felt anger rising inside me. I never signed such documents. We have a copy. Bronwyn showed me a scan of the document. Here's your signature. I studied the document carefully. The signature did look like mine, but I knew I had never put it on that paper. It's a forgery. I looked Bronwyn in the eye. Someone forged my signature, and I know who. Mr. Polk, that's a serious accusation. She looked alarmed. If you're sure, we'll have to freeze all accounts and start an investigation. That's exactly what I want. Freeze all accounts that have been accessed without authorization, and freeze all cards issued in the name of Darcy Polk. Bronwyn nodded and began to follow my instructions. While she worked, I mentally cursed myself for my carelessness. How could I not have noticed that someone had accessed my money? How did Darcy manage to forge my signature so convincingly? All done, Bronwyn said after 20 minutes of work. All accounts are blocked until the circumstances are clarified. Cards issued in the name of Darcy Polk are frozen. If anyone tries to make a purchase with them, the transaction will be declined. Thank you, I exhaled with some relief. What else do I need to do? Write a formal statement about the fraud, she handed me a form, and possibly contact the police. I filled out the statement, describing the situation in as much detail as possible, but without mentioning any personal details. I didn't want to involve the police yet. First, I needed to talk to Torin to understand how involved he was in this. Leaving the bank, I went straight to my son. It was the middle of the workday, but I didn't care. I rang the doorbell of their house, not knowing if anyone would be home. Torin opened the door, and I was surprised to see that he was home and not at work. Dad? He looked confused. What are you doing here? We need to talk, I said, walking inside without waiting for an invitation. It's urgent. Thorin led me into the living room. He was pale and looked even more haggard than when we last met. Are you sick? I asked, noticing his appearance. I took the day off, he said, looking down. I couldn't concentrate on work. I sat down across from him and decided to get straight to the point. Do you know that Darcy has access to my bank accounts? Torin flinched but didn't look surprised. I suspected something like that. She asked me to sign some papers a few weeks ago. She said it was for a joint investment portfolio that you wanted to set up for the whole family. And you believed her? He faltered. I don't know what to believe, Dad. She's so convincing. And I wanted it to be true. The truth is, I tried to keep my voice under control, she stole a significant amount of money from me, and she's going to run away with her lover to Europe. Torin turned even paler. Are you sure? Absolutely, I have proof. I took out the folder Morton had given me. Photos, printouts of messages, transaction data. Torin took the folder with trembling hands and began to look through the documents. His face changed from disbelief to shock, then to pain, and finally to anger. Pierce Blackwood, he muttered. I saw that name in her phone. She said he was a client. He's her lover. I put my hand on his shoulder, and they were planning to run away with my money. Oh my God, Torin covered his face with his hands. How could I have been so blind? She manipulated you skillfully. I tried to soften my tone. People like Darcy are very skilled at deception. Thorin looked up at me with a tortured expression. What should I do, Dad? For starters, help me get all the information. I need access to her computer. Why? I want to know all the details of their plan. When they're flying out, where they're staying. Turin hesitated only for a moment. Her laptop is in the bedroom. She never logs out of her accounts. She thinks I'm too stupid to check anything. We went up to their bedroom, a luxuriously furnished room with a huge bed and expensive furniture. An open laptop sat on the dressing table. She left for work early today, Thorin explained. She said they had an important presentation. I sat down in front of the laptop and started checking Darcy's email. She really hadn't logged out of her account, and all her correspondence was accessible. I quickly found what I was looking for. Emails about booking a cruise and a hotel. They're flying to Barcelona in 3 days, I said, looking through the documents. They're staying at the Azure Lagoon Hotel for 2 days before the cruise. She told me she was going to a conference in Chicago, Torrance said with a bitter smile. I continued my search and found a few more interesting emails between Darcy and some real estate agent in Italy. They were discussing the purchase of a villa on the coast. The correspondence mentioned a specific amount, $480,000. That's where my money was supposed to go. I showed the letter to Torrin, to a villa in Italy for her and her photographer. Torrin looked completely devastated. I can't believe it. We were happy, at least I thought we were. You deserve better, son. I closed the laptop. And now we have a chance to put an end to this story. What are you going to do? I've already blocked all the accounts and cards Darcy had access to. She won't be able to withdraw a cent. But that's not enough. I want her to learn a lesson she'll remember for the rest of her life. What lesson? Torrin looked alarmed. I'm going to arrange a special reception for them at the Azure Lagoon Hotel, I smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. Trust me, they won't forget it. I took out my phone and dialed the number of Ennis Raven, the manager of the Azure Lagoon Hotel. We met many years ago when I helped his brother finance a startup in the oil industry. Raven had been indebted to me ever since. Ennis? This is Kieran Polk, I said when he answered. I need your help with a delicate matter. I explained the situation, omitting personal details but emphasizing that it involved fraud and the theft of a large sum of money. Raven listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. So, you want us to give them a special welcome? He asked when I finished. What exactly do you have in mind? First, when they try to pay with their card, it should be declined, but not right away. Let them check in first, go up to their room, unpack their things, and then, when they try to buy something at the hotel or pay for services, the card won't work. That's easy to arrange, Raven sounded intrigued. What else? I want a special surprise waiting for them in their room. A folder with photos of their meetings, printouts of their messages discussing how to steal my money. And a note from me. Interesting. Raven was clearly impressed with my plan. But you realize this could cause a scandal? They could file a complaint. About what? I smirked. That someone exposed their fraud? Besides, it's my room. I paid for it, even if it wasn't my choice. I have the right to leave whatever I want there. Fair enough, Raven agreed. What else? When they realize their cards are blocked and try to leave without paying, I want them detained. You can call security, the police, whoever. Tell them they're trying to run away without paying their bill. Detain them for as long as possible. And then let them go. Let them go wherever they want. But I want you to record their reaction. Install cameras in the room before they arrive. I need proof of their fraud. Raven was silent for a few seconds. That might be borderline illegal, Kieran. Hidden cameras in the room. Only in the living room, I clarified. No invasion of privacy. Only common areas where they will discuss their plans. It's all for gathering evidence of fraud. Raven sighed. Okay, I'll do everything I can. When are they arriving? In 5 days, I'll send you all the details of their reservation and the materials you need to put in the room. We discussed a few more details, and I hung up, feeling satisfied. The plan was starting to take shape. Are you really going to do this? Asked Thorin, who had heard the entire conversation. It seems cruel. Cruel? I looked at my son in bewilderment. After everything she did, stealing my money, cheating on you, planning to run away? Thorin lowered his eyes. You're right. I just still can't believe this is happening. You will soon. I put my hand on his shoulder. And you'll have to make a decision. You can warn her if you want. Or you can let her get what she deserves. I won't warn her, Thorin said firmly. She deserves what she's going to get. I nodded, proud of his determination. Now we need to prepare the materials for Raven. Print out the photos, messages, everything we have. We spent the next few hours compiling a dossier on Darcy and her lover. We printed out photos of their meetings, screenshots of their correspondence, and data on transactions from my accounts. The result was an impressive folder, irrefutable evidence of their betrayal. Then I wrote a note that I planned to leave in the room. Dear Darcy, I hope you and Pierce are enjoying your stay at the Azure Lagoon. Unfortunately, your vacation will have to be cut short. All accounts you had access to have been blocked. All cards have been frozen. The money you managed to steal will be recovered through legal action. Enjoy the vacation you deserve. Best regards, Kieran Polk. I sealed the note and photos in an envelope and placed it in the folder. I'll send this to Raven by courier tomorrow, I said, closing the folder. He'll take care of the rest. Torin nodded, his face tense. What should I do? When she comes back today, how should I behave? As usual, I looked him in the eye. Don't let on that you know anything. Let her think her plan is going as intended. When she says she's leaving for the conference, just wish her luck. I'm not sure I can. Thorin looked doubtful. Every time I look at her, I see her with him. Then don't look at her. I squeezed his shoulder. It's only for a few days, and then you'll be free of her forever. We agreed that I would keep him informed of all the details of the plan. When I left, Torin looked more determined than he had in months. Perhaps this betrayal had finally awakened in him the strength of character he had always lacked. On the way home, I called Bronwyn Quincy again to make sure all the accounts were securely blocked. She assured me that everything was under control. If there are any attempts to withdraw funds, we will notify you immediately, she said. And Mr. Polk, I would still recommend that you contact the police. This is serious fraud. I'll think about it, I replied. But first, I want to see how far they're willing to go. I hung up and smiled. The plan was in motion. Darcy and her lover would get a lesson they would remember for a long time, and I would finally be able to protect my son and my money from this predator. 3 days passed in tense anticipation. Torin called me every evening to tell me how Darcy was bustling about, packing for her supposed conference in Chicago. She was excited, often whispering on the phone, locking herself in the bathroom and checking her passport and tickets several times, which she hid in her briefcase. She's acting like nothing's going on, Torin said, and I could hear a mixture of pain and anger in his voice. She kisses me goodbye and says she'll miss me. Hang in there, son, I encouraged him. It'll all be over soon. On the day of her departure, I waited for news from Torin with particular impatience. He called in the evening when it was already dark. She's gone, he said briefly. She took a taxi to the airport around 3 in the afternoon. She said she'd be back in a week. Are you okay? He paused for a few seconds. I don't know. I feel empty and angry, very angry. I understood his state of mind. Anger was better than pain. It gave him the strength to move on. Come over to my place, I suggested. You shouldn't stay in that house alone right now. Thorin agreed and was at my place an hour later. We spent the evening discussing a plan of action and waiting for a call from Ennis Raven. I knew that Darcy and Pierce were due to arrive at the Azure Lagoon the next day around noon European time, so I set my phone to ring in the middle of the night. Raven didn't disappoint. He called at exactly 2 a.m. our time. They're here, he said without preamble. They seem very happy with their lives. They checked in and went up to their room. They haven't used their cards yet. Everything was paid for in advance. Did they find my surprise? I asked, instantly awake. Not yet. The folder is in the room safe. I left the code for the safe in an envelope on the bed with a note saying it was a compliment from the hotel. They'll definitely open it. Great, I smiled in the dark. Keep me posted. Of course, Raven lowered his voice. The cameras are set up as you requested, only in the common area of the room. If they start discussing anything, we'll record it. I thanked him and hung up. Thorin, who was staying in the next room, was already standing in the doorway, looking at me questioningly. They're here, I said. They don't suspect anything yet. What now? Now we wait. Raven will call when there's news. It was impossible to sleep after that. Thorin and I went down to the kitchen, made some strong coffee, and waited. I turned on my laptop. Raven had promised to send a link to the live feed from the cameras as soon as it was available. The link arrived an hour later. We saw a luxurious hotel room, a living room with a panoramic view of the sea, white furniture, a huge bed in the bedroom. Darcy and Pierce were on the balcony, their silhouettes visible through the thin curtains. They were drinking champagne and, judging by their body language, celebrating the successful start of their trip. Disgusting, Thorin whispered, looking at the screen. They look so happy. Not for long. I finished my coffee and poured another. The real show will start soon. We had to wait almost until morning. Around 6 o'clock our time, Darcy and Pierce returned to their room after breakfast. They were excited and cheerful, talking about their plans for the day. They wanted to go on a tour of the city, then have lunch at an expensive restaurant. All on my tab, of course. Oh, look, Darcy noticed an envelope on the bed. Compliments of the hotel. I wonder what's in it. She opened the envelope and read the note. Here is the code for the safe. They say they left a special welcome gift for us. Maybe champagne, Pierce suggested, approaching the safe. Or fruit? He entered the code and the safe door opened. Inside was a black folder with gold embossing, exactly like the one I had sent Raven. What the hell? Pierce took out the folder. Is this some kind of joke? Darcy joined him, and together they opened the folder. Their faces froze when they saw the contents. Photos of their meetings, printouts of messages, transaction details. My God, Darcy whispered, flipping through the pages. This can't be. What is this? Pierce looked confused and frightened. Who did this? Darcy found my note and read it aloud. With each word, her voice grew quieter and more tense. When she finished, an oppressive silence hung in the room. He knows, she finally said. The old man knows everything, and he blocked the cards. Check it? Pierce looked panicked. Maybe it's a bluff. Darcy took out her phone and opened the banking app. Her face paled. The account is blocked. No access. Check the other cards, Pierce began pacing the room. You have several, right? Darcy feverishly checked one card after another, but the result was the same, all blocked. It can't be, she slumped down on the edge of the bed. He blocked everything. Everything. How did he find out? Pierce turned to her, his face contorted with anger. You said he wouldn't suspect anything. I don't know, Darcy snapped. Maybe Thorin let it slip, although I doubt that slob would have had the courage. I felt Thorin tense up beside me. Hearing the woman he loved speak of him in such terms must have been painful. What do we do now? Pierce grabbed his phone. I'll check my cards. He checked something for a few minutes, then cursed. I have almost nothing. A few thousand on my credit card, but that's barely enough for return tickets. I've got almost nothing either, Darcy looked lost. Everything was on those cards. And the cruise? The cruise is canceled, Pierce smiled bitterly. And the villa in Italy. Damn it, Darcy, you promised me a new life. $500,000, remember? I know what I promised. She raised her voice. It's not my fault the old man turned out to be smarter than we thought. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Ennis Raven appeared at the door, accompanied by 2 security guards. Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Polk, he began in a formal tone. I'm afraid we have a problem with the payment for your room. What do you mean? Darcy tried to remain calm. The room was paid for in advance. That's correct, Raven nodded. But the payment was made with a credit card that is now blocked due to suspected fraud. The bank has revoked the transaction. This must be some kind of mistake, Pierce interjected. Give us a few minutes. We'll sort it out. I'm afraid not, Raven remained adamant. We have received notification from the cardholder, Mr. Kieran Polk, that it was used without his knowledge. He has provided evidence, and we are required to act in accordance with the law. He's my father-in-law, Darcy tried to smile. Just a family misunderstanding. In that case, you can settle this misunderstanding with law enforcement, Raven signaled to the guards. They're already on their way. What? Darcy paled. You called the police? It's standard procedure when fraud is suspected, ma'am. Pierce began frantically gathering his things. We're leaving, immediately. I'm afraid we can't let you go until law enforcement arrives. One of the guards blocked their way to the door. Please stay in your room. This is illegal detention, Pierce protested. You have no right. We have the right to detain persons suspected of fraud until the police arrive, Raven replied calmly. Those are the laws of Spain. I watched as Darcy sank down onto the sofa, her face expressing utter defeat. Pierce continued to argue with Raven, but to no avail. You can contact Mr. Polk if you want to settle this without involving the police, Raven suggested, looking straight into the camera as if he knew we were watching. Do you have his contact information? Darcy raised her head. Yes, I do. A few minutes later, my phone rang. I knew it was her, but I didn't rush to answer. Let her suffer. After the 5th ring, I finally answered. Kieran, Darcy's voice sounded pleading. Please listen to me. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Really? I tried to speak calmly. Are the photos of your meetings with Pierce also a misunderstanding? And the transfers from my accounts? And the villa reservation in Italy? I can explain everything, she began to cry, but I knew those tears were fake. It's not what you think. Stop it, Darcy, I interrupted her. The game is over. You lost. What do you want? Her voice changed, becoming cold and calculating. Money? I'll return everything I took. You won't be returning anything, I smiled. The bank has frozen all the accounts. The money will stay where it belongs, with me. Then what do you want? Her voice was desperate. Why did you call the police? I want you to understand one simple thing, I said slowly and clearly. No one dares steal from me or hurt my son. No one. Torrin, she said his name with contempt. You've always cared only about him. He's more important to you than anything else, right? He's my son, I replied simply, and he deserves better than you. What are you going to do? There was a hint of fear in her voice. Put me in jail? I could, I admitted. Fraud, grand theft? You'd get real time. But I don't want Torrin to go through a trial. I heard her breathe a sigh of relief. Instead, I continued, I'm offering you a deal. I'll tell Raven to let you go and not call the police. In return, you sign the divorce papers I've already prepared and waive any claim to Torrens or my property. And of course, you never show up in our lives again. Divorce? She sounded surprised. Torrin wants a divorce? What did you think? I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. After what you did. He knows everything, Darcy. Everything. There was silence on the other end of the line. All right, she finally said. I'll sign the papers. But how will I get home? I don't have money for a ticket. I've already taken care of that, I said. Tickets in your names are booked for tomorrow's flight. Economy class, of course. Not first class, which you're used to on my money. What about tonight? Where are we going to stay? Her voice sounded panicked. That's your problem. I was ruthless. Pierce should have enough money to pay for a cheap hotel for one night. You... She started to say something, but I interrupted her. The divorce papers will be waiting for you at Lake Charles Airport. Sign them, and you're free to go wherever you want. If you don't sign, I'll file a police report. I hung up without waiting for her response. Torrin looked at me with wide eyes. Did you really book their tickets home? He asked. Of course, I smiled. I'm not a monster, son, and I want her to come back here and sign the papers. It's easier than going through the courts. I called Raven and instructed him to release Darcy and Pierce, but to make sure they had left the hotel first. He promised to do exactly that and to record their reaction. Torrin and I spent the next 24 hours preparing for Darcy's return. I contacted my lawyer, who quickly prepared the divorce papers, as unfavorable to Darcy as possible. She would receive nothing but her personal belongings. Are you sure she'll sign? The lawyer asked. These terms are very harsh. She'll sign, I was sure. She has no choice. The day of Darcy's return arrived. Torrin and I met her at the airport, or rather, we didn't meet her. We waited in the car in the parking lot. My driver was supposed to intercept her immediately after she picked up her luggage and hand her the documents. Are you nervous? I asked Torrin when we saw that the plane from Barcelona had landed. A little, he admitted. It's strange to realize that it's all ending like this. It's not ending, son. I put my hand on his shoulder. It's starting over, without her. Half an hour later, my driver called to say that Darcy had received the documents. She looked exhausted and irritated, but she took the folder. Pierce wasn't with her. Apparently, they had broken up in Barcelona or somewhere along the way. She's coming to see you, the driver said. She said she wants to talk in person. I exchanged glances with Torrin. Are you ready for this? He took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, it's time to end all this. We drove to Torrin's house, the place that had been Darcy's home just yesterday. It felt strange to walk in there knowing that she would soon appear, but now as a stranger, we didn't have to wait long. The taxi pulled up to the house about an hour after we arrived. Darcy got out of the car, looking nothing like the confident woman she had been just a few days ago. Her hair was carelessly tied back in a ponytail, her makeup was smudged, and her designer clothes were wrinkled. She entered without knocking, still considering the house her own, and froze when she saw us both in the living room. So you're both here, she said, dropping her bag on the floor. Family council? The documents, I ignored her sarcasm. Did you sign them? Darcy took the folder out of her bag and threw it on the coffee table. Yes, everything is signed. Are you satisfied? I checked every page, making sure her signature was where it needed to be. Then I handed the folder to Torrin, who had been watching her silently the whole time. Great, I nodded. Now you can take your personal belongings and leave. You won't even let me explain? Darcy turned to Torrin. Talk in private? No. Thorin's voice was firmer than I had ever heard it. No more talking, Darcy. No explanations. Are you really choosing him? She nodded in my direction. Your controlling father over me? Your wife? I'm choosing myself, Torrin replied, for the first time in my life, and I want you to leave my house. Darcy looked as if she had been struck. She clearly hadn't expected such firmness from Torrin. It's all because of him, she pointed at me. He always hated me, always wanted us to break up. No, Darcy, Torrin shook his head. It's because of you. Because you cheated on me with Pierce. Because you stole my father's money. Because you planned to run away and leave me. It was a moment of weakness, she tried to justify herself. I would have come back. Pierce and I, it didn't mean anything. $500,000 in a villa in Italy doesn't sound like a moment of weakness, I remarked. Darcy shot me a vicious look. It always comes down to money, doesn't it, Kieran? You think you can buy everything, including your son's love. Don't drag him into this, Torrin warned. This is between us, and it's over. Nothing is over, Darcy suddenly shouted, her mask of composure finally crumbling. You think I'll just walk away and that's it? After everything I've invested in this marriage? In you? 3 years of my life. Invested? Torrin smiled bitterly. You mean your time? Or my father's money, which you spent on yourself and your lover? It was our mutual decision to live well, Darcy went on the offensive. You always said you wanted a beautiful life. Not through theft, Torrin said quietly. I never wanted that. Darcy shifted her gaze from him to me, her face contorted with rage. It's all because of you, old man. You always stood between us. You've always been a shadow in our marriage. What will Dad say? Will Dad approve? She mimicked Torrin's voice. I'm sick of listening to this. Enough, I stood up. Your things. You have an hour to pack them and leave. After that, I'll call the police. Darcy looked at me with hatred, but she knew she had lost. Without a word, she turned and went upstairs to the bedroom. We heard her opening closets, pulling out drawers, throwing things into bags. Several times something fell with a crash. Apparently she was taking her anger out on inanimate objects. Torrin sat silently, staring at a single point. I could see how hard this breakup was for him, despite everything Darcy had done. You're doing the right thing, son, I said quietly. It hurts now, but it will get easier with time. He nodded without looking at me. I know. I just can't believe it was all a lie. 3 years, and all for money. 45 minutes later, Darcy came downstairs with 2 large suitcases. Her eyes were red but dry. She had clearly decided not to give us the satisfaction of seeing her cry. I called a taxi, she said coldly. It'll be here soon. Where are you going? Torrin asked, and I heard genuine concern in his voice. Despite everything, he still cared about her. What difference does it make to you? Darcy snapped. I have friends, real friends unlike you. Torrin flinched as if he'd been struck, and I felt anger boiling up inside me. Do you have everything you need? I asked, barely holding back. No. She looked me straight in the eye. I don't have the $500,000 I plan to take, or the villa in Italy, or the future I imagined for myself. You took all that away from me. No, Darcy, I shook my head. It was never yours, and it never would have been. The taxi honked from the street. Darcy took one last look at the house that had been hers for 3 years, then turned to Torrin. Goodbye. I hope you'll be happy with your daddy. You'll never have another relationship. You're too weak and spineless for a real woman. With that, she left, slamming the door behind her. We heard her loading her suitcases into the trunk of the taxi, the car door slamming, the car driving away. It's over, Torrin said quietly as the sound of the engine faded into the distance. She's gone. I put my hand on his shoulder. Yes, son. And now a new chapter in your life begins. Without her. He nodded, and I saw in his eyes a mixture of pain, relief, and most importantly, determination. Torrin had finally grown up after going through this painful experience, and I was there to support him. A week had passed since Darcy left our lives. Torrin stayed in his house, even though I offered to let him move in with me for a while. He refused, saying he had to learn to live on his own. I respected his decision, but I still called him every day and often stopped by with food or just to talk. That morning, I sat on the porch of my house watching the sun rise over Lake Charles. The city was waking up. I could hear the factory siren in the distance, and the first cars were passing by on the road. I drank my coffee and thought about what had happened, trying to learn from this unpleasant story. How could I not have noticed Darcy's true nature before? There were signs: her excessive interest in my finances, her extravagance, her ability to manipulate Torrin. I saw all of this, but I underestimated the scale of her ambitions and her willingness to commit a crime. Perhaps I relied too much on my life experience, believing that I could easily recognize a fraud. Or more likely, I didn't take her influence on Torrin seriously enough. My son has always been a gentle person, prone to being influenced by others, first by me, then by Esther, and then by Darcy. I should have realized that she was exploiting this trait of his. A phone call interrupted my thoughts. It was Gerald Morton, the private investigator. "Good morning, Mr. Polk," he said in his usual businesslike tone. "I have some information that may be of interest to you." "I'm listening." I put down my coffee and sat up straight in my chair. "Pierce Blackwood returned to Lake Charles 2 days ago. He broke up with your ex-daughter-in-law back in Barcelona, right after the incident at the hotel." "Not surprising," I chuckled. "As soon as the prospect of money disappeared, so did the love." "Exactly," Morton agreed. "But there's more. He's already found a new patron, the widow of an oil tycoon, Eleanor Baxter. She's 68, he's 36. Classic pattern." I shook my head. Eleanor Baxter was an old acquaintance, not a close friend, but we had crossed paths at various social events. Her husband, Gordon, had died 2 years ago, leaving her an impressive fortune. "Do you want me to continue surveillance?" Morton asked. I thought about it. Should I warn Eleanor? Or let her deal with the fortune hunter herself? "No, I think we're done," I finally decided. "Send me the final report and the bill." "As you say, Mr. Polk, it was a pleasure working with you." After hanging up, I returned to my thoughts. So Pierce had already found a new victim. I wondered what had become of Darcy. The last I heard, she was staying with a friend. No money, no husband, no prospects for the luxurious life she had dreamed of. I didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choice by trying to steal from me and break my son's heart. But I still hoped that this experience would teach her something. Although, knowing people like Darcy, I doubted it. After lunch, I drove to Torrance. He had already started tidying up the house, throwing away things that reminded him of Darcy, rearranging the furniture, even repainting the walls in the living room. Physical labor helped him cope with the emotional pain. "Hi, Dad." He opened the door, wiping his hands on a rag. He was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt stained with paint. "Sorry about the mess. I decided to renovate the kitchen." "You look better than last time," I remarked as I entered the house. "More energetic." "That's right," he nodded. "Work helps me not think." We walked into the kitchen where Thorne was cooking something on the stove. It smelled delicious. My son had always loved to cook, but he rarely did so when Darcy was around. She preferred restaurants or delivery. "What's for dinner?" I peered curiously into the pot. "Gumbo," he smiled. "Mom's recipe. Remember she always made it on Sundays?" I remember. I felt a warm wave of memories wash over me. Esther said that gumbo isn't just food, it's a whole philosophy. "The best things in life take time and patience," Torrin quoted his mother. I'm just now beginning to understand what she meant. We sat down at the table, and Torrin ladled the gumbo into bowls. For a while we ate in silence, enjoying the taste and the warm family atmosphere that had been so lacking in recent years. "I got some news about Pierce," I said when we had finished the main course. "He's already found a new victim." "Eleanor Baxter." Thorne raised his eyebrows. "Gordon's wife?" "They were at our wedding." "Gordon's widow," I corrected him. "And yes, they were. Apparently that's when Pierce spotted her as a backup option." "Are you going to warn her?" Torrin asked, pushing his plate away. I shrugged. "I don't know. On the one hand, it would be the right thing to do. On the other, Eleanor is a grown woman and should be able to judge people for herself. Like I did, Torrin asked bitterly. I looked at him. There was still pain in his eyes, but now it was mixed with anger. Anger at himself, at Darcy, maybe even at me for not saving him from this mistake. Are you blaming me for not stopping you? I asked directly. Thorne was silent for a long time, then shook his head. No, you warned me, though not directly. I just didn't want to hear it. I was blinded by her. Love often blinds people, I sighed. Even the most intelligent ones. Was it love? Thorne said thoughtfully. Now I'm not sure. Maybe it was just the need to be with someone. Fear of loneliness. Or the desire to prove something, I added cautiously. Maybe to myself. He looked at me in surprise. What do you mean? Darcy was the complete opposite of what I considered the ideal partner for you, I explained. Bright, assertive, ambitious. Perhaps you chose her in part to show your independence from me. Torrin thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. Perhaps you're right. I always felt like I was living in your shadow. A successful father, a big house, money, and I was just Kieran Polk's son. Darcy seemed like a way to prove that I could make my own choices, go my own way. And it's okay to want your own path. I leaned across the table toward him. I always wanted the best for you, but maybe I pushed too hard, controlled too much. Esther always said I didn't give you room to make mistakes. Mom understood a lot, Torrin smiled. She told me similar things, that I had to learn to make my own decisions, even if they were wrong. And she was right, I sighed. I tried to protect you from all the problems I faced myself, but maybe those problems are what made me who I am. We moved to the living room and Thorne poured us whiskey, a good single malt scotch that Darcy never understood or appreciated. She preferred champagne or trendy cocktails. You know what hurts the most? Thorne said, staring into his glass. That I feel used. As if I were just a means to her ends, a stepping stone to your money. That hurts, I agreed. But it's also a reason to think, why did you let her use you? What in you made that possible? Torrin grimaced. You've always been ruthlessly straightforward. It's the only way to grow, I said, taking a sip of whiskey. I ask myself similar questions. Why couldn't I protect you better? Why didn't I see the danger sooner? You can't protect me from everything, Torrin said quietly. And that's okay. I'm 40 years old, Dad. It's time I learned to take care of myself. I looked at him in surprise. There was more maturity in those words than I expected to hear. Perhaps this painful experience had really helped him grow up. You're right, I nodded, but I'll always be there if you need me. That won't change. I know, he smiled, and I appreciate it. It's just, maybe it's time to stop being just your son and become myself. And who is myself? I asked with interest. Who do you want to be, Thorrin? He thought for a moment, looking over my shoulder. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. All my life, I've been either your son or Darcy's husband. I've never thought about what I want for myself. Now is the time to think about it, I said, raising my glass in a half-joking toast. To a new beginning? To a new beginning, he said, touching my glass with his. We talked late into the night. For the first time in many years, we were truly open and honest. About his childhood, about my mistakes as a father, about Esther's death and how it changed us both, about his marriage to Darcy and how he now saw that relationship from a distance. You know, I loved her, Thorne said when the clock struck well past midnight. No matter what, even now there's a part of me that misses her. That's normal, I nodded understandingly. Love doesn't disappear just because someone turned out to be someone they weren't. Do you still love Mom? He asked suddenly. Every day, I replied without hesitation, and I will love her until the end of my days. You're lucky. There was a hint of envy in his voice. To find true love. You'll find it too. I was sure of it. Just give yourself time to heal and be more careful in your choices. How will I know I'm not making the same mistake again? Fear was evident in his eyes. That I'm not falling for the same tricks? You can never be completely sure, I shrugged. But you can learn to recognize the red flags. Excessive interest in money, attempts to distance you from your family, inconsistency between words and actions, and most importantly, listen to your intuition. Deep down, you knew something was wrong with Darcy, right? Thorne nodded. I knew, but I ignored the signs. Exactly. Don't ignore them anymore. The next morning, I woke up on the couch in Torrin's living room. We had both fallen asleep while talking. The sun was already high in the sky, flooding the room with golden light. I heard sounds coming from the kitchen. Torrin was making breakfast. "Good morning," he said when I entered, rubbing my stiff neck. "Coffee? I'd love some." I sat down at the table, watching him move confidently around the kitchen. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," Torrin began, placing a cup in front of me, "about finding yourself. And I'm thinking of quitting the company," he said, sitting down across from me. "Being a legal advisor has never been my passion. I did it because you thought it was prestigious and reliable." I felt a pang of conscience. I had insisted that he go into law, even though he had always gravitated toward creative pursuits. "What do you want to do?" I asked, trying to sound supportive. "Remember how I always loved to cook?" His eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "I'm thinking of opening a small cafe. Nothing fancy, just a place with good home cooking where people would want to come." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "A cafe? That's unexpected, but it sounds interesting." "I know it's risky." He looked a little uncertain. "And I understand if you think it's a stupid idea." "No," I interrupted him. "I don't think it's a stupid idea. If it's what you really want, I support you." "Really?" He looked surprised. "I thought you'd be against it." "The old me would have been against it," I admitted. "But I've learned a few things lately, including that I need to trust your decisions." Thorin smiled, sincerely, openly, as he had before Darcy. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot to me." We finished breakfast, and I got ready to leave. At the door, Thorin suddenly hugged me, tightly in a manly way. "Thank you for saving me," he said quietly. "Not only from Darcy, but from myself." "You saved yourself," I patted him on the back. "I was just there." On the way home, I thought about our conversation and how our relationship had changed over the past few days. Perhaps there was a silver lining to what had happened. Torrin and I had become closer than we had been since Esther's death. When I got home, there was a message on my answering machine. It was a woman's voice that I didn't recognize at first. "Mr. Polk, this is Eleanor Baxter. I understand you've been inquiring about Pierce Blackwood. I would appreciate it if you could find the time to talk. Please call me back." I smiled. Apparently, Eleanor was smarter than I thought and had suspected something was wrong. Or she had her own sources of information. In any case, I was glad that another potential victim of Pierce had been able to escape his charms. I dialed Eleanor's number and, when she answered, arranged to meet her the next day. Perhaps I should be more open with people, share my experiences, and help them avoid the mistakes my son had made. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset and thinking about the future. Mine, Torrin's, our families. Darcy was no longer in our lives, and I was sure she wouldn't be coming back. Her plan had failed, and she was smart enough to know there would be no second chance. I didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Torrin was starting a new chapter in his life, one that was more independent, more authentic. And I was learning to let go of control and trust. My son, my instincts, even some of the people around me. Of course, I wasn't going to become naive. Life had taught me that trust must be earned, not given automatically. But perhaps the golden mean between paranoid suspicion and blind trust was the wisdom I had always sought. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Torrin. "Dad, I just wanted to say thank you again," he said, "for everything. And I love you." "I love you too, son," I replied, feeling my heart warm. "I always have and always will." I hung up and smiled at the approaching night. Life went on, despite betrayals and disappointments. And maybe sometimes we need to go through dark times to learn to appreciate the light.